So this is an interactive opportunity. We love bringing in amazing thought leaders. Prasanth has been a friend of the COO Forum for a number of years now. We love working with Prasanth. We have a number of members that have worked with Prasanth and his organization and have done some amazing things with their thought leadership. So today is our opportunity to interact with, I think, is really a great mind when it comes to all things productivity. And for me, Double Gemini has a number of tools that I use daily, but it's more than just a single point of use, a single person using a single tool. It's really about getting the whole organization functioning to a higher level of productivity. Prasanth is going to talk about helping us get into the zone and what does it mean to be in the zone and be at your fullest optimized potential, bringing your best game to play every day, and how that translates across the organization. So excited to have Prasanth Nair. Double Gemini, I think, founded. This is your 25th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it is. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So some amazing work by Prasanth and his team. So with that, we'll hand it off to Prasanth.
All right. Thanks so much, Chuck. Fiona, COO Forums, really nice to be here. I've done a number of presentations for you guys. Let me share my screen here and hit play on my presentation. Can you guys see this screen okay?
Yep.
Cool. All right, let me just set up my Zoom window real quick so that it's optimized. Okay. Chat. All right. So, as Chuck mentioned, I'm Prasanth Nair. I'm the founder here at Double Gemini. It's really nice to be speaking to the COO Forum again. I always love doing events for you guys. What we do at Double Gemini is we focus on core productivity. So time and task management, meetings, emails, files, a few other things. I'll tell you a little bit more about it later. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping. Yeah, if you can keep your cameras on, that'd be great. Second, this is going to be interactive, so just find the chat and make sure that you've got access to it. But we're also a small group, so if you guys have questions about the things that we're talking about, stop me. We have plenty of time, and we can go deep into any one of the topics that I'm covering. Like I basically go through things that where I'll present a philosophical idea. I'll give you guys an example, but if you want to dive deeper in anything that I talk about, happy to do that. Yeah, with that, I think let's dive in here. Okay. So, quick show of hands. How many of you guys have heard the phrase "I'm in the zone"? Yeah, everybody, right? And how many of you have seen athletes or musicians or actors or really anybody who is performing who is totally in the zone? Right? Yep. Okay. And how many of you have been in the zone yourself when you're working on something? Right? Time just fades away. Boom, you're totally connected, right? Now, what's interesting about this is that everyone knows what I'm talking about, even without a formal definition. And of course you do, because it's a natural state. And I think that being in the zone is actually a state of balance. And when you're off balance, you know it intuitively. So towards this concept, this presentation is really focused on teaching you a model that I use to understand how to get in and stay in the zone. Now, we're going to focus it more on an individual level, but it can be the same model can be applied at the team level and even the organizational level. And we do that when we do our larger scale productivity consulting. Okay, now attention. So attention is a really good place to start a discussion on getting in the zone. So attention, in my opinion, is the currency of productivity. So how many of you would agree that if you can't concentrate, you can't deliver, or at least deliver efficiently, right? Makes sense. So there's a researcher named Tom DeMarco, and he's a researcher and author, and he wrote about attention in his book called Peopleware, which came out in the 70s. And what he found was that it took his developers, his programmers, about 15 minutes to warm up on a complex task and about 10 minutes of continuous work to produce a meaningful output. How many of you have experienced that? You sit down to work on something, report strategy, do some analysis, and you just got to crank and warm up around it. and then you're going to produce, right? Okay. So there's always this cognitive warm-up time whenever we're approaching any type of intellectual task. Now, the amount of time that it takes to warm up depends on a lot of factors. So it depends on the complexity of the task and your familiarity doing it. So if it's a quick email, maybe it's going to take you 30 seconds to warm up. If it's a complex thing that you're working on, maybe it's going to take you 20 minutes to warm up. If it's a complex thing, but you're a real subject matter expert in that area, maybe it's going to take you less time. Okay. But there's always a warm up and there's always a moment when you're actually producing things. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. So let's say you're doing a complex 1-hour task. So you warm up, which takes about 15 minutes, then you start working on it. So what you're looking at here is the anatomy of a 1-hour task. Okay, that's great. Let's take a look at what normally happens. So you warm up and then, oh, ping, get interrupted. And then you warm up again and then you start getting some work done and then ping, oh, got that text message, got that email notification, and then you warm up again and then you work and then boom, this one takes you down a rabbit hole. And then you warm up again and then you get some work done and suddenly a 1-hour task took over 2 hours to get done. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. Now, if it's happening to you guys, it's also happening to every single employee in your organization. And often you lose a tremendous amount of productivity because of this work pattern. And this is what an entire day can look like, especially if you throw in a few meetings, right? Look familiar? Like the visual of the typical work day for a lot of people. Now, I've done time studies on myself and other people and found that people often lose anywhere from 40 to 60% of their productivity each week just because of this pattern. So question for you guys, and you can type in the chat or just shout it out loud. What's the biggest problem, or actually preferably just shout it out loud. What's the biggest problem or problems with working this way? What do you think?
The interruptions.
The interruptions, what's the impact of the interruptions?
You just lose track and you definitely can't be productive.
Yep.
Ineffective, yep, and inefficient.
Sorry, could you say that again, Dean?
I said ineffective or inefficient.
Yeah, you're ineffective, inefficient. Yep.
I think
Takes you a lot longer to get things done. Yeah.
there's an unknown knock-on consequence that takes place because you know, the first 1 or 2 you're okay with, but then you start getting frustrated, and then your downstream work is impacted without you being aware of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a cascading effect that happens, especially like if you throw this pattern day after day over a 5-day period, like by the time you're done with the end of the week, you're burnt, right? And frustrated, and you have more anxiety, and you know that you weren't performing at your potential. Anything else?
I would argue that the warm up takes longer because you have to go back and say, okay, where was I? So there's that whole repeating of the warm up to a higher extent.
Yeah, you're losing a tremendous amount of time just warming up over and over and over again when you have to do it with an interrupt-driven pattern. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? It's pretty good. Okay. Now, before I give you my perspective, let's contrast this with what a productive day can look like. So on a productive day, you're able to tackle email and comms, which are usually the biggest reasons for interruptions at once, warm up, and then crank out work. Now, if you could work like this, would you feel better? Probably. Would you produce better quality work? Significantly better quality work. And would you get things done faster? Absolutely, right? Okay. Now, I once read, and I believe this is true, that the majority of our habits are unconsciously built. And in my opinion, that's the biggest problem with the workday on the left. Unconsciously, a fragmented day leads to a fragmented week, to a fragmented month, to a fragmented year, and in the long run, it results in a fragmented mind. So what's at stake here is your mind. So the question that you, your organization, your team members are facing every single day is, what will you become? Will you become organized, calm, proactive, the best version of yourself, or will you be fragmented, scattered, and reactive? Now, I've seen people whose identity becomes wrapped around a fragmented approach to working. It's not healthy. If you end up sticking with jarring, unsustainable work patterns, in the long run, that's what you'll become, is fragmented. And the tragedy of a fragmented mind is lost potential. Now, I don't want that for you. Hope you don't want that for yourself. So we're going to talk about how to address this. So to move out of a reactive, fragmented state and to achieve an entirely new level of productivity, you need to be able to own your attention. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point you towards a path to accomplishing that. Now, remember here, this is the keynote. It's, we'll have about an hour, hour and a half. I can't completely solve it for you, but I can show you the way and start giving you some tools and tips to move in that direction. And this path of understanding this starts with understanding the obstacles to completing a given task. So let's say this box represents a single task, okay? So the first dimension of the task is time. So from left to right, it represents progress, the time you're working on the task. So the longer the box, the longer the time takes. The second dimension of the box is brain power. So it's the mental bandwidth you have to apply to the task at hand. The taller the box, the more brain power you have to apply to get the task done. Everybody with me so far? Okay. So let's zoom in here and assume that this box expanded represents, again, a single task, that you have a good amount of brain power that you need to apply to get the task done, and you're working on a task that's going to take a little bit of time. So the first thing to know is that tasks are always divided into two primary components, what I call content and process. So the content is the blue area, and the process, which takes up brain power as well, is in red. So let's say you're trying to build a presentation with Google Slides or PowerPoint, but you're terrible at using Google Slides or PowerPoint because who isn't? So in that case, you're going to spend the majority of your brain power dealing with the process layer of the task, as you can see here, and you're not going to have much left to supply to the content. So the process limits the amount of brain power you have to devote to the content. So as you can see here, there's very little blue area left, right? How many of you guys have experienced it? You've struggled with a web or desktop or mobile application and spend the majority of your thought cycles just like trying to use the thing instead of actually focused on the content and the strategy and the things that are actually going to move your business forward. You've experienced that, right? Okay. Now, if you're spending all your effort on the process layer, what do you think it does to the quality of the output? Lowers it, right? Yep, probably shotguns the quality, right? Or sinks the quality, maybe that's a better way to do it. So it lowers the quality. Now, there's another downside, and that is the more effort that you spend on the process layer, usually the longer it takes to get a task done. Now, getting back to a little bit more of a reasonable process layer, I want you to understand here that the process layer isn't just about using a piece of software. It refers to the know-how that you need to get a task done, the skills and the competencies to complete the tasks in a timely and high-quality manner. Now, just to give you an example here, I have a fairly high competency at building presentations. So the impact of the process layer on my overall brain power is pretty small. So it leaves a lot of room for my brain to focus on the content of building a presentation. Okay. So the first major obstacle to getting into the zone, to being able to apply all of your brain power to the task at hand, is the impact of the process layer on your ability to deliver a task. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, just to step back for a second, if you were to start using this model towards evaluating your organization, one thing that you can look at is what are all the process layers that are impacting the ability of our people to get work done, and what can we do to start mitigating those things? So it's just a framework here to start thinking about it, and you'll see as this framework expands, there's a lot more to it. Okay. So the question is, what can you do to be more efficient with respect to the process layer for any given task? Okay, so there's a lot of things. A few of my favorites: templates, workflows, training, and shortcuts. Those are all really good strategies for minimizing the impact of the process layer. If you create templates, it makes it easier to jump into a task. If you write down very specific workflows, It makes it, it really reduces the cognitive overhead to do those particular tasks. And of course, you know, the more training that you have, the faster you're going to be able to do the tasks, the lower you're going to warm up, the less warm up time it's going to take. And last but not least, one of my favorites is mastering shortcuts. And I mean keyboard shortcuts for using an application. So I'm going to just show you a couple of quick examples here. Okay. So this is an agenda template that, well, should put it in here. Okay. This is an agenda template that I use every time that I'm spinning up a new meeting. Okay. Really small thing, but the template's already structured in a way where I can just start typing in the outcome, start listing the topics. So maybe this is going to be design review. Maybe this is going to be brainstorm, selection. And so whenever I'm building an agenda for a meeting, I'm not starting from scratch. I'm not using a just, you know, like off the cuff thing. I'm not just putting bullet points into a particular slide deck. I've actually got a template that I'm using to do this. What do you think this does to my cognitive overhead? Reduces it pretty dramatically, right? Able to immediately get in and focus on the content of the meeting because I got a template that structures it. Now, at Double Gemini, if I just go into our template gallery here, and this is just the templates that we publish to our Google Workspace, but you can have templates in Outlook as well. You can see here that we've got quite a few templates just off the bat that we've got right for starting on projects, especially. That's what most of these templates are project-based templates. But aside from these project-based templates, we probably have about 70 templates that we have in our template libraries per group. So these are shared templates across the company, but about 60 to 70 additional templates per group. So we've invested heavily in building out templates so that we can really facilitate people focusing on the content layer instead of the process layer when it comes to doing things. Does that make sense? Cool. So it's a good and often overlooked strategy when people need to build things and do things. Another just small example here, and I had mentioned keyboard shortcuts. Okay, so we have a particular technique, and I'll actually put this into the chat window. This is actually how Chuck came to hear about us in the first place. It's called the stack method, and this technique is completely free. So if you come to this site, you can basically watch a series of videos, and then it's got how-tos for how to empty your inbox, get your inbox to 0, and maintain a sane inbox. And like I said, everything is completely free on this site. So one of the things that we cover in the stack method is using keyboard shortcuts. So you can see here that I've got a list of keyboard shortcuts, and we have them for Outlook, and we have them for Mac. Oh, thanks, Chuck. Chuck just dropped his actual inbox into the chat. He uses the stack method on a daily basis. Okay, so keyboard shortcuts. If you learn and master keyboard shortcuts, you'll save about 35 hours a year on processing your email. And that's just using keyboard shortcuts, not even learning the entire rest of the stack method. So the point that I'm trying to make is that often when we're thinking about productivity gains, people miss the small stuff that really can be a game changer in facilitating a rapid change in productivity over the course of not just a day, but especially over the course of a year. Any questions on this so far? No? Okay. Is this interesting so far? Yeah, cool. Okay. So to begin with, the first thing, so the biggest thing that I've really learned with respect to the process layer is don't discount the small things. Every little bit counts. So and actually, I would even say that tiny efficiencies are often much more powerful than the larger ones, especially in aggregate, and organization after organization misses that. Any questions on the process layer? No? Cool. You know, incidentally, we make a lot of assumptions that when we have people that work for us, especially knowledge workers, that they have the know-how to do these things, and often they don't. They've never invested in that particular know-how, and so they're often performing things at really inefficiently. And if you start just diving in to asking questions about how people approach the process layer to the work that they're doing at your organizations, I think you're going to be shocked. Tim, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his last name. The CEO of Apple, Tim, what's his last name?
Cook.
Tim Cook. Yeah, Tim Cook. Tim Cook has this thing where he asks people 10 questions. So whenever he's evaluating how people are performing a particular function, he asks people 10 questions. And if they can answer all 10 questions, then they're clear and he doesn't bother them for a while. If they can't answer those 10 questions, then he knows that they're not performing things efficiently, and then he expects them to actually take an approach to remediate it. And it also shows the depth at which they've understood something. So it might be an interesting approach to evaluating the process layer when you're looking at how your organization is performing. Any questions on the process layer so far? No? Cool. Okay. So the next major obstacle to productivity is interruptions. So interruptions limit your brain power. So basically, your brain has to switch back and forth between the interruption and your work. And studies have shown that this results in a 50% reduction in the speed at which you can do something, and a 50% increase in errors when you're trying to accomplish a task. And this is the biggest reason why you can't text and drive, you know, as a really good example. Okay. Okay. Now, as I discussed earlier, interruptions can significantly impact the amount of time it takes to get a task done. Question for you guys. What are your biggest sources of interruptions? You can type it into the chat or shout it out, whatever.
Employees.
Instant messages. Teams
Instant
or Slack.
messages.
Slack. Yeah.
Slack. I mean, the name implies it in and of itself. My mind. Good one, Andrew. Often overlooked. Yep. Yeah, Andrew, we'll chat about it, your mind too, and when we talk about this thing called jump starts, and plan my week, I'll tell you a little bit more about how that really impacts the mind. Cool. Okay, so my two favorite strategies for dealing with interruptions are turning off notifications and a technique that's called the Pomodoro technique. So turning off notifications is just what it sounds like. I have almost zero notifications on, no emails, no chats, no texts, no in-app notifications. We have a lot of clients that use Slack. I do not have Slack notifications on. I proactively go and check Slack when I need to a couple times a day. Now, even for the few that I have turned on, often I'll even turn those into focus mode when I actually need to concentrate on a particular task. Okay. All right. So the second approach that I use for dealing with interruptions is a technique called the Pomodoro technique. How many of you guys have heard of this before? None? Okay. So this is one of the most useful productivity techniques that I've ever come across. So the Pomodoro technique was developed in the 80s in Italy by an Italian programmer named Francesco Cirillo. And he decided to use it to gamify his ability to work because he was having trouble concentrating. Now, if you think about this, it's like, I think it was 1982. There's no apps, no text, no, email, no notifications, right? And this guy is having trouble concentrating. Imagine just like the time warp between then and now and all of the things that are competing for our attention, okay? This is fascinating. So what he did was he actually was in his mother's kitchen. He saw this timer. It's a Pomodoro timer. So Pomodoro is tomato in Italian. And he grabbed it and he set it for 25 minutes and decided that he was going to work uninterrupted. He wasn't going to take on any interruptions during that 25-minute period. And then after that, he was going to set it for 5 minutes, take a break, and then rinse and repeat and do it again. And if he made it through 25 minutes with no interruptions, that he was going to give himself a point. And that's how he was going to gamify his productivity over the course of the day. Okay. So that's the basic for the Pomodoro. And the goal is to accumulate as many Pomodoros as you can over the course of the day. So essentially 25-minute working periods or 30-minute total sessions. Okay. So my record is 27 Pomodoros. And that's actual concentration. It's 13 and a half hours of total concentration. So it's definitely the most productive day that I ever had. Now, this technique is really fascinating because what it does is when you first start using it, it makes you acutely aware of how often you're being interrupted. So when I first started using this, I thought like, wow, I can concentrate, no problem. And I was shocked, like I couldn't even make it through the first Pomodoro for a good 2 hours because of the number of interruptions that were coming my way. So what it does is, and so then I started having to be really cognizant of those things and then really proactive about dealing with them. So what it does is it challenges you to stay focused, and then it gives you a reward for accomplishing more. Okay. So let me paste this into the chat real quick. You can read a lot more about the Pomodoro technique at pomodorotechnique.com. I'm not affiliated with that site. And also for those of you that do want to try this, there are a lot of Pomodoro timers out there. If you just type in Pomodoro timer or focus timers, you can find them. My favorite one is one called Focus. I have it on my Mac as a desktop application, but it's also on my phone, and it syncs between the two. Okay. Now, just a quick note, and this is just a little bit of an aside. If you do decide to try this technique, at the very first break that you'll hit, or the very first couple of breaks, you'll feel like, oh, well, I really don't need that break. I can actually just skip it and then keep working. Don't do that. And the reason why is because by taking those little breaks, it gives our minds a chance to reset and move things from short-term memory into long-term memory. It basically kind of clears our own cache in our minds. And what I found is, especially when I've done really lengthy Pomodoro sessions over a long period of time, is that the early breaks are the most important ones if you want to have longevity. So if you want to get 10, 15, 20 Pomodoros done over the course of the day, you have to take the early break. So that means standing up, stop looking at your computer for a second. Don't worry, you're going to be able to warm up and get right back in just a heartbeat. It'll just be a minute to warm up when you get back into it. Okay. Also, if one thing I would really recommend is to research and find a Pomodoro timer that your IT can install on people's computers. And if any of you ever want me to do a quick 30-minute presentation for your organizations on using the Pomodoro technique, I've got a very short presentation and I can introduce it to you. But if you find Pomodoro timers, if you give them to your people, you're going to see a dramatic improvement in productivity just by the nature of using it. So it's just, again, another small technique. Any questions on this before I move on? No? Cool. All right. Okay. So at this point, what I've done is I've outlined the first two obstacles to getting work done, which together, they can significantly limit the amount of brain power that you have to apply to a task. So you can see here in blue that just due to these two things, you've got a lot less brain power to apply to the content. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions so far? Okay. Sorry about the coughing. I had COVID last week, and it really kicked my butt. So still like I'm the long tail of recovering, even though I've been like done with it for like 7 days. All right. Okay. So this is great. but it actually gets worse. So the next major obstacle to getting work done is getting started in the first place. Now, how many of you have sat down to work on a task and you either bailed on the task or you procrastinated or you just took forever to get moving on it? Yep. No, Andrew, it's never happened to you.
Heck no, I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. Well, for the rest of you, that means that you're human. For Andrew, live long and prosper, my friend. All right. So, I'm sorry about that. So getting started has actually been my biggest weakness. I especially stress about it on large projects. And then once I start, what I often realize it was just a paper tiger, and that I just delayed getting something done that could have made my life much easier if I had just gotten it done sooner. So I have a few recommended strategies on how to make it easier to get started. So the first one is pretty simple. It's the 15-minute rule. I don't like cleaning, so I just tell myself I'll only do it for 15 minutes. Actually don't like doing sales either. So the way that I approach doing my sales work every week is just going to do 15 minutes of it. And so it's a lower commitment, and that makes it much easier to get started. And then from there, I'm actually able to apply myself and work a little bit longer. Another really good strategy for getting started is to use divide and conquer. So that's just pretty simple. Take a larger task, break it down into smaller ones. Very effective. A third strategy is to co-work. And this is something that we use often at Double Gemini, and we often will train our clients to use, and we help our clients implement co-working strategies. And by that, what we mean is we'll have people put in their Slack channels or Google Meets or company channels a co-working channel, so that anytime somebody wants to hop on a Zoom call or a Google Meet or whatever Teams call, and just do a concentrated set of Pomodoro sessions, but with somebody else at the same time, you can co-work where each of you is just doing your own job, but you use yourselves as accountability partners to get that work done. And we found that this is a really fun and successful strategy because different people end up working with each other. There's usually a couple minutes every now and then to, over the course of co-working where they get a chance to connect with each other, but people are able to stay on task. They see that somebody else is working. They're able to work themselves. Yeah. And again, if you had any questions about putting something like that in place, something that I can help you guys with. Okay. Now, the last one here is one of my favorites, and that's something that I use that I call a jump start. And Andrew, this is coming back to the mind itself. Okay. So a jump start is a cue that makes it easier to start on a particular task. Okay. So jump starts include links, phone numbers, notes, bulleted lists of ideas, recommended actions, anything that makes it easier to get started on a particular task. So for example, let's say on your task list, you had these tasks: review and provide feedback on presentation, call Adam, craft agenda for meeting. Not bad, but it could be a lot better if you end up using jump starts. So imagine instead, when you're writing down these tasks, you link to the presentation. You put in a number to call Adam, or you added some ideas into your task list for the agenda itself as you're writing down the task, okay? Do you think that those things would actually reduce the cost of getting started on a particular task? Absolutely, right? Okay. So what jump starts are tiny little cues, but cumulatively, when you add jump starts to all of your tasks, it's a total game changer. And this is such a small thing, but most people don't even know how to write tasks out in the right way to begin with. And if you just learn just this slight variation about how to write tasks, you have more efficient tasks with a lot less resistance to getting started because you've front-loaded the thought process of diving into the task instead of back-loaded it where you had to figure out how you were going to get started when you were actually doing the task itself. It's totally inefficient. the second way that we've talked about it.
Prasanth, just real quick, and I think I learned this
Yeah.
from you, but I use it effectively, is that if I have an email that I have to respond to that has a certain amount of thinking that I have to, ponder on this email, I'll actually take the contents of the email, drop it into my calendar, and make that a meeting that I'm going to schedule a time piece for that thinking session. And I use that as a jump start, so that I don't have to go and search for the email. Of course, I don't have to with the stack method anyways, but if I use the email as an actual meeting agenda item on my schedule, and it's a huge saver.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's definitely something that's covered in the stack method, is to schedule those emails. And Chuck, you can even go a step further because if you can even write a few notes into the description about how you want to process it, or any ideas that you have about that email, even as you're doing that scheduling, to
Okay.
even take that even a little step further. Not necessary all the time, but it's definitely useful.
Yeah, capture my
Yep.
initial thoughts. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, thanks for that, Chuck. Okay. So, what you're looking at here is the hypothetical graph of the amount of energy required to get started on a set of tasks without jump starts. Okay. Now, just to be clear here, each red line represents a task, and specifically the energy required to get started on each one of these tasks. If you added in jump starts to every single task that you wrote down, the graph of your energy would go down significantly. It would actually look, your energy to get started on a task would look something like this. Okay. So overlaid, you see what a huge difference this can make. And not just for you guys, but imagine if all of your team members just took a short course workshop, and again, something we can help you with, where they learned how to write down tasks well to begin with, right? So my experience, this makes a huge difference, especially when you get later in the week. I see a lot of people who hit late Friday and they're burned out. And in comparison, when I hit late Friday, I'm fresh and ready to go. And I think it's primarily because I use jump starts and I use them religiously. Any questions on jump starts? No? Cool. Jump starts are, and I cover this a little bit more when I do our deeper time management class, but they're part of a larger classification of mental tricks to reduce the cognitive load of performing a task. And it fits under a broader category that I call offloads. And process documents are another example of offloads. Standard operating procedures are another example of offloads. There's many different types of little tiny automations that you can actually set up to move forward with your task lists are examples of offloads. Another really small example of an offload is using a browser strategy so that you can set up tab groups in your browsers so that, and I could even show you guys real quick here. So this is Safari. See all these tab groups right here? Anytime I'm working on one of these things, so if I was working on app dev goal planning or the zone website, or we're doing our strat planning, I can literally just switch to that tab group, and I don't have to spend a lot of time getting warmed up on that task, because that is a strategy that really lowers the cognitive overhead for working on the task in the first place. Okay, so just trying to point out to you guys, there's a broad set of strategies that can actually work well for jumping into things, and so that comes into play. Any questions on jump starts? No? Cool. Again, just one of the things that's always fascinating to me is just to see the impact of this at the organizational level. You do a little workshop for people, teach them how to write tasks differently, and then you see a cascading effect in how much it impacts their productivity, and also how good they feel over the course of a week, because they're approaching work with a little bit more sanity and a little less mental angst. Okay. Now, so it turns out that getting started is still not the beginning. There's actually something that precedes it. And that is deciding what to do in the first place, which is the box that I placed here to the left of getting started. So you have to choose the task to work on in the first place. And if you don't do that efficiently, it can dramatically slow down and impact your ability to get in the zone. Okay. So I have one strategy for deciding what to do that works better than anything else that I've tried. And I call that strategy plan my week. Okay. So it's really simple. On Thursday, or actually I do it on Fridays right now, anytime during the day, I have a 2-hour block and I organize my entire upcoming week and booking out my calendar in advance. I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. Okay. So here's what it looks like. So this is my calendar this particular week. And you see how there's this plan my week session right here. So that's not just for me, that's for actually our entire team. We all hop on a call. Usually it doesn't take, well, this week it's for an hour and a half, but usually we've set it up for 2 hours as a 2-hour block. So during that call, everybody hops on and everybody goes through the process of writing down all their tasks with jump starts. And if we need to, people can go into breakouts because they might be working on tasks or projects or things with other people. And then they take their tasks and they block them on their calendar. So right now, at the end of today, when I do plan my week, this calendar isn't going to look like this. It's going to look like this. It's going to be fully booked out over the course of the week. So if you look kind of like, well, not last week because last week I was sick. But if you look at any particular week, each one of these weeks was booked out an entire week in advance. Does that make sense, guys? Cool. What do you think the advantages are to blocking out time on your calendar a full week in advance? Nobody? No
Yeah,
advantages?
numerous advantages. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
staying organized, thinking things through. You're going to be more productive, most definitely.
Yep.
You're making sure you're getting to the things that are actually important instead of getting to the end of the week and realizing you were just interrupted and putting on everybody else's fires the whole week.
Yeah. You're proactively planning your time. You're getting an understanding of what those commitments are, and then and making sure that you have time allocated to do the things that you really need to get done. What else?
Question, do you allocate time for those, basically the fires? Because no matter how you can plan the perfect week and no matter what you do, yeah, just last week, oh, that somebody just quit. Now I gotta, deal with somebody quitting. You can't plan it. No matter how much I like to plan everything, you can't plan everything. So do you
Yeah.
give yourself time to deal with basically little fires that pop up constantly?
Yep. And so it's a really great question, Kat. So there's a so right now I actually don't deal with a lot of fires. So I just typically just block my entire week out. And because everybody at Double Gemini is doing the same thing, what we found is that, and when we've taught this technique to clients, we've seen the same thing happen. There tend to be a lot fewer fires when everybody is actually proactively planning their week in advance. A lot of times fires happen because somebody forgot a particular dependency, and then suddenly they're making everybody scramble at the last minute because they need to hit a deadline. So that's what usually happens. So like I think that poor planning at an organizational level, organizationally like supported planning, is one of the reasons that a lot of fires happen, in the first place. Now, there are specific roles and functions where we'll block out 2 hours a day just for operational support. So, for example, if somebody's in like an engineer, like an IT engineer, there's always some system that's going to break on any given day, and they need to have time allocated. So what we'll do is they'll make sure they have 2 hours blocked out every single day for just dealing with fires, and they'll double book that time with tasks that that aren't high priority, but then If they can't get to it, they'll push those tasks out to another day. And depending on your role, your organization, you can do the same thing. So you can just allocate that. Another thing that you can do is you can use other indicators. Like, for example, you could add a little exclamation point or other things to things that are non-critical, or like, you can use symbols within the calendar entry itself, like a little tilde to identify things that are non-critical, so that when you're planning your week, like at a glance that you can move those things around. Cool.
One thing I think is also important is that you allocate the time that is right for that task. So if you know, for example, my time where I'm most productive is from 9 to 11, then I can put the tasks that are most important in that time slot, and the things that are less important at like 2 to 4 p.m. or something like that. So I think that's also important.
Yeah, absolutely. Like organizing it and structuring your day in a way where you can leverage your best mental capacity is really important. Yeah. Also, you'll notice here, and I'm not going to cover it here, but beyond jump starts, you see how there's do's and co-works and quicks and meets, like in plan sessions. So that's a strategy that we use when we teach people our task planning and task management, so that they can actually build calendars where they can really get a sense of what their workload is and the types of tasks that they're doing. And of course, there's a little bit more behind all of this. But when I was explaining how to write tasks the right way, if you write tasks with this particular strategy, you can end up with a much more successful task list. And if you guys do it as an organization, then it's a game changer for how people operate. And really, the cost of it is an hour and a half to 2 hours of dedicated time for teams, team by team, to actually spend time planning. Cool. Any other questions on the calendaring? No? Cool. All right. Incidentally, when I do that kind of planning work, one of the other big advantages is I'm going into the entire week with a concept of exactly how my week's going to pan out. I'm not going into the weekend thinking, crap, I've got all this stuff to do next week. What am I going to do and how am I going to do it? I'm literally going into every week thinking, oh, yeah, this is what I'm going to get done over the course of the week. So it really opens up my weekend. I'm not thinking or cycling or processing or, work at all. Andrew, actually, the one thing that I forgot to mention is when you block the time in this particular way, you end up with far fewer mental interruptions, because a lot of the times the mental interruptions are because you haven't accounted for all the things that you're supposed to do. So you're trying to work on something, you haven't accounted for something, and so you get that nagging like cycle in the back of your head saying, hey, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And those interruptions are slowing you down from being able to concentrate on the work at hand. When you plan your calendar like this, like a week in advance, and it's not difficult, folks, it's really an easy exercise, then you eliminate a lot of that cycling, because you know that you're working on the right thing at the right time, and you're have all the time allocated to get the things done that you need to get done. So it's a tremendous mental relief, and it goes a long way in towards allowing you to concentrate fully at the task at hand when you get to that particular session. So didn't want to forget to say that. Cool. All right. Everybody clear on that concept and strategy? Any other questions?
I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
So during the week, as things are coming up, things to do, right? Are you just jotting those down in a general list and then waiting till the Friday, assuming they're not critical, then you kind of triage that on Friday to plan the next week? Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So Diana, we're actually building software for this whole thing right now. So a little later this year, 2 months from now, be starting to introduce some of our software to the COO Forum. So I'm pretty excited about that. But
Nice.
what I do is I make sure that each one of my projects has a task list that's associated with it. And then I also have just ad hoc tasks, personal tasks as its own task list for things that don't fit into the projects. They're basically activities. And so over the course of the day, what I do is I make sure that as new tasks come in, I'm just jotting them down either in the right project task list or in my right personal task list. One thing that's really important is that you're able to do that really efficiently. You got to have that information right at your fingertips. So I can do it in about 10 seconds. So I never have this like mental hang up of like, oh, there's a task. Where am I going to capture it? Like it's just, there's a spot for it right to begin with. And then what I usually do is I'll also in my task list, which I have open always on my iPad, is I'll have a list for things that are today that I'll do as gap fills, like in between meetings or quick email or note that I need to send out. So I have a today list that I'll just tackle and then I'll check things off as I can get to it over the course of the day.
Got it. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah. And it's important that you really capture those things and don't just let them sit in your mind because otherwise they're occupying space in your mind. Once they're into a task list and you know that every Friday that you're going to tackle that task list, you can have 100% confidence in the system. So any type of productivity system, you have to have confidence in the system. Otherwise, you're going to bail on it. And so if you don't have like a dedicated time, like that Friday time slot to do something like that, then you're not going to have trust in the system and you won't know that and you'll worry that things are going to slip through the cracks and then you'll end up reverting back to reactive habits.
Yes. The getting things done method, I'm sure you have run into that one. Same thing. They emphasize, they call it like a GTD review. Because if you put things in the list and then you never look at the list again, what good is the list? So
Yeah.
that's an important piece.
Yeah, I think I won't go into it too much, but getting things done was really useful at its like, when it was created, like, which was, I think even he wrote it in the early 2000s. I remember reading it like 2003, 2004.
Very paper-based.
Yeah, very paper-based. But the one downside for that system is that he treats everything as like you have stuff and all the stuff funnels into one kind of massive inbox that you use to triage things. But the problem with that strategy is that different systems, different domains require different strategies to be productive within them. So when I was trying to do getting things done, I was trying to do it, but that worked for my task list, but it didn't work for my email and it didn't work for my chats and it didn't work for my meetings and like other things. So what I found is that you need domain specific strategies to actually be really efficient within it. So I have dedicated time carved out to do my email. And that's when all of my inbox and my email, I deal with that, triage it and work through it. But then I have dedicated time just for dealing with my tasks as well, like separately. So
yeah, I agree. That's been my experience too. Doesn't quite fit the working world we're in now, or the world we're in, digital world we're in now.
Yeah. Well, our application is going to be called Zone. So that'll be
nice. Can't wait.
The next iteration. So cool. I think there was another question. Kat, yep.
Yeah, I have tried variations of this in the past and I'm gonna try again, but I always like eyes are bigger than your stomach or whatever that saying is, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna do all of this, and even if I plan it out, so is it just basically practice, getting better to make sure that you can accomplish the right amount of work?
Yeah, it's definitely a muscle that you need to build. Like one thing that we notice is at the beginning of people are way underestimate the amount of time that it's going to take to get things done. So what we recommend is just telling people just whatever you think it's going to take, make it 1.5 times that or twice that just to begin with. Give yourself a little bit of leeway, right? Because worst case scenario, that 2-hour block, it took you an hour, you just shorten the time slot and just drag other things right into the spot, right? Then, you know, um, as you so as you go along, I think that the consistency of it is really important, because you need to do this for at least like 8 to 10 weeks solid before you're really going to find the rhythm and, like, you know, the efficient way to do this and allocate your time. You're just going to discover a lot about yourself through the process of doing it. And it's helpful to even look back at the previous week and say, okay, what didn't work? What did work when you're doing your plan my week? Another small thing is that when we do plan my week, I encourage people to also plan their personal stuff during the plan my week session, because if you want to focus into all of your attention on work, well, you're not going to be able to do it if you've got little things nagging in the back of your head that you're forgetting to deal with at a home level. So we really encourage people to take a holistic approach to task planning and to plan out their personal stuff and the things that they're going to do. Oh, and another thing that I forgot to mention, and again, we teach this when we actually work with organizations, is there's something that's called a shadow calendar. And I think this relates to your question earlier, Kat. But when people are trying to block time, they're often haven't created a realistic assessment of what their schedule looks like to begin with. So the very first step that you should take is, okay, how much time does it take to get me to work? How much time do I need to spend on doing email every day? Hour, hour and a half, 2 hours? You got to have that blocked. How much time do I have to spend doing firefighting every day? 1 hour. How much time do I actually need for lunch? Like, try to blow it off, but you actually need a half an hour. You've got to put those things in to your calendar so that you've got a realistic calendar. Once you've got the shadow calendar in play, right? Then, and another really good example of a shadow calendar is, like, you know that you have somebody that reports to you that typically needs an extra hour, half an hour to an hour from you every single week. Block time for that person, you know? You have to have those shadow calendar items in there. Otherwise, those are going to come in, affect your schedule, and stop you from being able to actually get the tasks that are done in an efficient manner. Cool. Again, we teach all this stuff at a more detailed level, but that'll give you guys some ideas to run with. Okay. All right. Everybody's good so far? Cool. So, the next two obstacles I'm going to discuss really in unison, and they are your mental and physical state. And you can see them at the top and the bottom of the diagram. And I put them at the top and the bottom because they kind of sandwich a task from both ends. Okay. Now, we've all had circumstances where it was tough to concentrate, personal issue, physical ailment, bad night's sleep, you know, and often they play on top of each other. If I'm mentally tired, I'm usually physically lethargic, or if I'm physically tired, I'm mentally spent, right? I have 4 kids. I didn't sleep for 10 years. Just started sleeping maybe 6 years ago. They got a little older. It's been amazing. So together, the mental and the physical, your physical state, can really compress your ability to concentrate. Now, I'm not going to go into strategies here because there's entire industries that are associated with this. But I would say that your mental and physical states are the first and most important things that you should focus on from a productivity point of view. Okay. If I was to draw a productivity pyramid, it would look something like this, with physical state and mental state as the foundations. And often people neglect this. You know, they're so busy, they're trying to get a lot of things done for work. And so they're skipping out on their time to exercise, right? They're skipping out on the half an hour they need to actually eat something nutritious. So they're skipping out on breakfast because they're running around trying to move projects forward, right? Initiatives forward. It's just not going to be very helpful or healthy in the long run. And you're just going to find that that while you can be productive for a day or a couple days, that, you know, productivity is really a marathon. It's not a sprint, right? So you need to be able to put these things in play and really be productive in the long run. I work out half an hour to 45 minutes every day. It's just like something that I do. I do it first thing in the morning. It makes a huge difference, and I just won't skip it. Versus, oh, I just won't skip it because it's that critical to my productivity. Any questions on this so far? No? Yeah. Okay. So coming back to this, now, as much as I would like to be done listing out the obstacles to productivity, there's one final one that I really can't leave out, and that is your identity. And this is really the biggest obstacle of all. And so it has a massive effect on everything else. And so now when I say identity, I could be referring to your personal identity, your team identity, your organizational identity, or all of the above. Okay. So here's an example. So I worked with an executive at one of the leading PR firms in the country, and she had 294,000 emails in her inbox. And I worked with her and her executive administrator to get that down to 0. And so for a while, every day she only had like 20 to 30 new emails in her inbox. She was able to handle it and tackle it and work through it. So we finished this engagement, and then a few weeks later, I get a panic call from her EA, and she said she's back to several thousand in her inbox. And the reason why is because this executive identified with being busy, and she couldn't operate in any other way. So basically, I turned her into a firefighter without a fire. So point being is that the identity matters. And so the way that now there's a lot of people that will say, and I actually just dealt with this with a client. They're like, well, culture beats eats productivity for lunch, or there's some phrase like that. I'm like, okay, well, process eats culture for lunch. And it's true. If you want to change people's identity, you have to focus in on the processes. Plan My Week is such a critical process. And if you make sure that you're putting processes like that in place, or better project planning techniques, then what'll happen is the culture of the organization will shift naturally as a result of it. So don't let identity be an obstacle. And the way that you have to deal with identity issues, whether it's on your personal level or it's a team or organizational level, is you put in the right processes, you mandate those processes, and you push things forward. And an interesting side note to this is when, so Peter Drucker, he wrote about the knowledge worker. If any of you guys are familiar with like Peter Drucker's work, right? So he said we went from an industrial era to, or from agricultural era to an industrial era to a knowledge era, right? And so, and he wrote a lot about how knowledge workers need autonomy. And it's gotten to a point where I think a lot of organizations are afraid of their knowledge workers. Oh, if I implement a particular process on my knowledge workers, they're not going to like it, and they're going to leave. Like I dealt with this just recently, where an organization, we taught them our meeting management technique. It's called the Unite method. And they were not willing to require that meeting agendas be a standard for meetings. And it was because the executive was afraid that it was going to impose too much of a constraint on their knowledge workers. Another organization was afraid to put in Plan My Week, or put in project planning sessions, or other things that were associated with like just core productivity techniques. So I would just, a strong bit of caution, or not a caution, but a recommendation to y'all is don't be afraid of your knowledge workers. The process is super important, and you'll actually find out the knowledge workers that are going to really work with your organization and be able to move things forward in the way that you envision it. If you can start putting in processes, you'll find the people that can dovetail with those processes, and the people that can't work with them, they'll leave, and that's okay. So I think there's just kind of a word to the wise, because that's something that I've seen a lot, is executives and organizations that are afraid of their knowledge workers. As a matter of fact, I would even say that if the knowledge workers that aren't willing to adhere to processes leave, your organization will function considerably better. You know, you can't assume that just like there's so many different times where I assumed like, oh, well, we had this designer. He was incredibly talented. And I was like, oh, I really don't want to lose this designer. But, you know, if I lose them, well, you know, that's really going to impact the quality of our work. And finally, they just wouldn't adhere to the processes. We let him go. We got another designer. Actually, we ended up with 2 designers who were totally willing to follow through with processes. And we have moved at twice, maybe 3 times the pace with much higher quality, like actually as an output. So that's my last little spiel on identity. Any questions or comments on that? No, I'm sure you guys have experienced that as well. Okay. So, all right. Yeah, so I think a learning mindset and using process are probably the most important things. Okay. Now, so at this point, you can see here, this is the full range of things that I've identified as primary obstacles to productivity. So I call this diagram the zone model, and it does a pretty good job of just depicting the major obstacles to productivity. And you can see how all of our potential brain power to work on a particular task gets buried by all these obstacles and gives us very little mental space to do great work and to do it efficiently. And if this is true for you guys, if any of this stuff resonates, it's probably 10 times more true for the people that are working across your organization. So what you can do is you can use this model to identify the obstacles to productivity in your organization, the real bottlenecks, and start putting together techniques that'll actually help alleviate those things. Now, the list of techniques that you see here as the bullet points, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many more possibilities once you dive in and really focus on optimizing these areas. Like, just for example, I could probably write an entire book on templates or on project management techniques or how to define operational processes. There's just a world of possibilities here. Recently, I was working with an executive at a law firm, a partner at a law firm, and he was talking about how he files this one particular type of brief because he's a litigation attorney, and I was asking him like, well, what's your strategy for writing those? And he described it to me. I'm like, do you ever have that written down? No. And so he went through the process of actually writing down and documenting his strategy for writing a brief and putting that into a template. And it made a huge difference because now he no longer had to think about it. And what he also found was that he was able to kind of make small modifications to that strategy over time. And about 3 to 4 weeks in, his template was far more complete and sophisticated. Not only that, but he could actually give that to other team members. They could use it. And so this thing that he'd done 1,000 times before, just by documenting and building a template around it, became so much more efficient with respect to it. So that would have been a bullet that would have gone into one of the boxes that was in here on this particular model. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. All right. Now, and also, if any of you did want to do an analysis or have me come in and evaluate your organization from this perspective, happy to do so. Okay. Now, I want to bring this all back to getting in the zone, which was the focus of this presentation in the first place. So it turns out that as you apply techniques to peel away the obstacles, you're going to end up noticing that your bandwidth grows. And with each obstacle that you remove, the better you can focus on the content, the faster you can get things done. And once all of the obstacles are removed, you're going to be just left with the task at hand. And you'll find that in this state, everything will fade away, time will stop, and you'll find yourself in the zone. And it feels pretty special. I think that it's the mental equivalent of reaching space. You're just like working along and suddenly everything feels effortless. I'm 51 right now, and I'm doing some of my most creative and impactful work. And I attribute that to my ability to essentially drop in the zone on command. I don't need I don't need hours to get in the zone. Even in a half an hour block that I've got allocated to something, because I have nothing else on my mind, because I know I'm working on the right thing at the right time, I can drop into the zone and accomplish that task with total clarity and efficiency. And then when I'm done with it, I can put it away and drop into the zone on my next task. And I can do that hour after hour, day after day, week after week, and so on, right? So I tune my productivity where I can drop into the zone on command, and that's not an exaggeration. Now, my wish for you guys is to experience this. My wish is that your teams and your organizations could experience this. So if you work towards it at the minimum, you can get a lot more done with a lot less stress. At the mid-range, you can experience a high degree of productivity and almost zero stress. And for those of you that are really thirsty, you can operate on an entirely new level with these strategies. You can work with total ease and really tap into your true potential. And so that concludes this presentation. My wish for you guys is that you're able to utilize some of the ideas that I've presented here to get in the zone, and even more so, maybe help your team members do the same. So with that, that concludes the presentation. Chuck, if it's okay, I'll just do a quick brief on Double Gemini real quick.
Yeah, please do. Absolutely.
Okay. So very briefly, guys. Oh, before I do that, any questions or comments on the Into the Zone presentation? Anything that's bothering you, things that you wanted to know about even deeper?
I had
Well,
one
I can
question.
say, sorry, go ahead,
Okay.
Stephen.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think it's great. It's a lot of good. I think I've seen versions of this in the past or different portions. So it's a great reminder on things I can do to be more effective in the teams. So again, not to poke holes in the zone or anything, but I'm curious on your thoughts. Are people in our kind of roles who have a lot of people relying on us, a lot of teams, how do you balance, the limiting interruptions with the being accessible and available to your teams at a moment's notice? I mean, I think all of us want to have like open door policies, and I want people to come in and ask me questions. And how do again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong. The model is fantastic, but again, there's got to be people in our roles or people leading roles. Do we have to have an acceptable trade-off when it comes to how do we support our teams?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think there's a couple things there. So first is if you want to tackle productivity, you got to tackle at the organizational level, because we're all dependent on each other. And so if other people are interrupt driven, then you're going to be interrupt driven. So
Sure.
if you don't do like a session like Plan My Week or do project planning in ways that are proactive, then a lot of the people that are going to report to you are always going to be reactive. So you're not going to be able to escape out of that constant interrupt driven pattern on your own. So I think it's really important culturally, like that you set a precedence for moving forward with that. If you do that, then I think you can segment time over the course of a day, office hours, where people can drop in and ask you questions. Usually nothing is burning so bad that they can't wait a half an hour or an hour or a couple hours. So if you had like open check-in, Stephen, at 12:30 and open check-in at 4:30 and open check-in at 9, like if you needed 3 half-an-hour blocks, you can just tell people, hey, if you got questions, pop in during one of these times, just have your questions, your list, and then we'll just go over it then. That way you don't have to have your entire day be interrupt driven. And of course you can tell people, look, if the world's going to be on fire and like you need it, stop by in between, but otherwise just wait till 12:30, And some of that requires making sure that as people get into that pattern, that you hold them to it. So they'll be so used to, just coming in and seeing you at like 10 in the morning, or just randomly in the morning. And when they do come with you with something, say, wait, okay, this is great, but I think it could have waited till 12:30. So just going forward in the future, just try to do it at that time slot. That executive that I actually just mentioned, he just implemented those office hours. He has them twice a day.
Yeah.
At like 11:30 and 3:30, like on average. And it's been a game changer for him because he's able to work concentrated on things that are actually moving his team and organization forward and not constantly bombarded by the interruptions. So
Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. Other questions?
I was just gonna say, in the past, I've heard, I think we all have variations of this, but you're giving very concrete examples and things to do. So I'm appreciate it, and I'm excited to try it.
Sounds good. And Kat, if you need any help, just let me know. All right. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Okay. So very briefly, we're Double Gemini. We have worked with a lot of different companies, probably every type of company you can think of, embassies and media and universities and law firms and logistics firms. So what we focus on is optimizing collaboration processes, meetings, emails, files, tasks. And the reason that we spend a lot of our time there is because that's where people are spending all their time. Like 80% of a person's job tends to be like doing their email and dealing with meetings and dealing with files and tasks. We worked with an executive at a VP at the Gap in their finance group. And the reason she came to us in the first place is because her executive coach asked her to do a time study. She found she was spending 70% of her week on email. She learned the stack method, and now she spends 4 hours a week on email, like in total. So emails lost its hold over her. We worked with Comcast Xfinity on meetings. The average engineer there was spending 55% of their week on meetings. We took that down to 20 to 25%, depending on the engineer. So we gave them literally more than double their productivity back by just restructuring and reorganizing how their meetings took place in the first place. There's just an incredible amount of possibilities if you focus on it. So we have a number of core services, the stack method, which I sent you the link to, which is about how to process your emails, the pulse method, which is about writing irresistible emails. If you guys want a cheap class, it's $99 a person that's going to completely change your corporate communications, it would be the pulse method. The Unite method for how to run meetings that matter, the Vision method for how to organize your entire corporate file system, the Zone method, so that's our time and task management. This is the one that we're building software on. We're coming out with our roadmap software in 2 months, and then a little bit later this year, we'll have our full time management solution. And then we help people with strategic planning. Most of these are online. So the stack method is stackmethod.com. The pulse method is pulsemethod.com for writing emails. The Vision method is visionmethod.com for how to tackle your corporate file system. That's a huge, there's so many possibilities for optimizing the way that you guys work. If you actually had a centralized file system, it's pretty amazing. And then the Unite method is for meetings. And in case you guys were wondering, if you just go to the Double Gemini website, you can access those courses or learn about our other services just by scrolling through the website. So 2 things here I'll say is there's the Double Gemini website. Also, here's my email address in case you guys want to get in touch with me. And that's it. Thanks so much for your time, guys.
Again, Prasanth, you always hit the ball out of the park. This hour and a half is just absolutely filled with tidbits and processes and thinking that if we all just put like one little piece of it in place, like I've got the stack method, and I'm doing pretty good with the stack method. It's given me back so much time. I don't know how many times over the years I've tried to do email management in so many different ways, but I didn't have a good process. The stack method works. Pulse, we use Pulse at COO Forum to write better emails. Just if you implemented half of the things, I don't know what that is. Like, what's a half of a half? You're going to give back so much time, and it's amazing. So again, thank you, Prasanth. If everyone would please come off mute, and let's give Prasanth a round of applause.
Oh, thank you.
Send him into the weekend on a high note. Again, please reach out to Prasanth. Him and his team are just full of knowledge. Your IQ will rise a few points just by having an interaction with Prasanth offline. So I wanted to cover a few things real quickly.
All right, so I'll take off here, Chuck. You guys have
Okay.
my information. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Prasanth.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye-bye.